Hi, everybody. Steve Tarter, another edition of Tartar Sauce. And with me on the phone today, we're happy to have Don Johnson, the CEO, president of Goodwill Industries of Central Illinois. Don, how are you this morning?
Doing well, Steve. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Well, all alone by the telephone, as they say, but hey, that's the nature of our time right now. Tell us, Don, and we've spoken before, and you've been extremely busy. I know you and your organization, you always are, but especially during the outbreak. What's going on now? I think let's start with this. People are home a lot now, uh, by not probably by choice, but by a necessity. Um, and they're probably doing some cleaning up. They're probably looking around and saying, "Hey, it's time we did that basement." Are you getting more drop-offs, more things, more donations during this time, or how's that going?
Yeah, I mean, when we compare March, April of last year to March, April this year, the donations are probably slightly up, but pretty much as expected. I mean, some Goodwills across the Illinois and our country have decided not to accept donations, but what we felt, Steve, was that would be a disservice because I think when people make donations and they're ready to do it, people will do what's convenient for them. And we wanted to at least be there and open our stores and our donation sites off to have the ability with the boxes and gaylords that we have where people can still make donations. And so the stores are filling up, the warehouse is filling up, and we think that having more product is a good thing for sure.
And of course, you are providing a service to people, and we should remind people that aren't aware, because I think most of us now just to go on the assumption that things are all closed, other than a few other shops and things. But you guys, your store is closed, but the donations are still. You have those boxes in place, and how often do you kind of clear out the donations there, Don?
Well, it's been 3 to 4 times a day, and it's some of the stores of the 11 stores we have in our region. There's 3 stores that probably we need to increase that around 7 or 8 o'clock at night. Just knowing, looking at numbers and data that we're watching and monitoring that every day with our cameras. We're doing what we can with staff, but we've kept on the payroll, even though we're not generating any revenue right now, 128 staff, and our board's pretty committed to that, both with health insurance and that's a commitment to our employees to keep the top talent. But they're staying away from customers, and they're going periodically 3 and now 4 times a day to clean up those donations. We got DECA when the governor passed this down many weeks ago. We looked at the order. We actually communicated with the order and got the okay to maintain our building, to maintain inventory, both at the stores with donations and back to the warehouse. So we have people that are working every day pretty much by themselves,
Right.
away from people until this thing's behind us. But you're right. The stores, we cannot open our stores yet. We are in a rebuilding phase right now with our program services staff that works a lot of employment services around the community with companies, our HR staff, and our retail staff to look at that build back. What's it look like? How do we protect our customers? How do we protect our staff? And a Goodwill Commons with participants. How do we protect them? So we're looking at all those with safety protocol, CDC, and all that. So we're really right now we're just waiting. We'll be waiting on the okay from the governor. And once we think we get the okay from the governor, whenever that is, we think we'll need about a week to 10 days to get the stores back in order to get ready for customers.
John, one of the things I know that Goodwill is very active in is jobs and employment. How is that going during the outbreak?
Well, we just had a committee meeting this morning with program services and members of our program service staff and board, and they're actually working virtually with Department of Labor and HOD and our funders. They've been really good to work with. They've been a little more flexible, but they care about those outputs and outcomes as we knew they would to get those numbers. So we're learning each day and been doing it now for about 6 weeks at home. We had to do the VPNs and looking at technology to what product's best for us. We've now kind of settled on Microsoft Teams since we have the 365 product, but we've used Adobe Connect, we've used Cisco WebEx, we've used Zoom, we've used different packages, but we're doing it every day virtually. The staff meets every day virtually online and goes about to helping those jobs in the community that are still out there get filled. We see transportation, we see food, we see a little bit of healthcare in certain spots. We see cleaning, but it is still, moving forward. We think that, when COVID-19 is behind us, are there going to be some businesses that don't open up? And we think that there's a possibility that some businesses won't open up, which means, do we think unemployment's going to rise? Oh, yeah. And then we think with our employment services side, because a lot of people don't know about Goodwill, that we probably are one of the leaders in employment services for all of Central Illinois. Last year, we worked with 4,719 people in employment services. So, and it's all free. It's our care back to the community, not just putting money back into our vet downing home, almost for veterans, but also looking at building employment services. And I've been here, Steve, 4 years now, and employment side of our business has grown each and every year.
John, if somebody is listening to this, watching this, hears about it, and wants to check into it, what should they do? Go to the website? Is there a phone number? What do you suggest? Yeah,
the best thing is to go to www.goodwillpeo.org, goodwillpeo.org, or just Google it, Goodwill Industries of Central Illinois, Peoria, and you'll find it.
Right.
And we change those sliders each day. Every day we're making updates to the website because that's how people are really getting the message from us as social media, whether it's donations or whether other things going on in employment. We constantly are updating that every day now since we have majority of our staff working from home.
Gotcha. Well, that's been the way of the world here for a number of weeks. What's the status now of the Veterans Home that Goodwill operates?
It's probably been about 7 weeks ago. I went down with our HR staff and our program service staff to say, guys, this COVID-19 is pretty serious. With your age and some of the health issues you have, we're putting the facility on lockdown to protect you. And we still holding firm with that to protect the guys because with their age and some of the health issues they have, they're at risk. And
right.
So are they getting a little stir crazy? Yep, but we're bringing in food and doing the things that we can with them. But I think for the most part, they understand how serious it is. I know we were cutting grass yesterday, and my gardener was down there, who's my wife, was volunteering putting plants down at the vet home to make it look nice. But the guys do, come out and talk and walk around the block and do what they can individually. But it's been tough for them, but I think they understand.
Right. Well, I know there's probably a lot of cabin fever out there. I mean, I know people can get outside, and thankfully the weather has been reasonable. We've had our ups and downs a little bit, but nothing too drastic. And, there is, I don't know if I want to say light at the end of the tunnel, but there does seem to be a lessening of the, sort of the heaviness, the drama that was certainly in place in March.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Doesn't March seem so long ago?
I know.
But, yeah, I think you're right. It's people are getting used to it, to how to protect themselves.
Right, and that's good. Obviously, we don't know what the future will bring, and we'll see. Your take then is that Goodwill is standing ready to reopen probably a week to 10 days after you get the go ahead from the state.
Yep, we'll look at bringing staff back when we can, when we're ready. And I think the governor saves a lot of that to getting the stores ready. But you're exactly right, Steve. It's going to take about a week to 10 days to get everything in the front office part where the customers are in order.
Gotcha. Don, one of the things that we have talked about in the past, and I bring it up only because I'm wanting to do a story on this. Being an old newspaper guy, about your days delivering the newspaper, and I say this not to single you out, Don, because many of our listeners or viewers probably have a shared experience with delivering papers, not necessarily in Central Illinois, but like you in Indiana or somewhere else across the country. But I think it's a sort of a fascinating part of our history. The folks that maybe got that first job on the bicycle, delivering the local paper, whatever it was. Nowadays, of course, the paper is facing some real challenges in across the board. So it may soon be sort of a memory. But tell us, if you would, a little bit about your experience. You got into it big time.
Oh yeah, when I was going into fourth grade this summer, between third and fourth grade, growing up in Terre Haute, Indiana, in the pre-Larry Bird era, my mom and dad, were pretty tough on me and my three brothers, saying, if you guys want those basketball shoes or those running shoes, then you're going to earn and go get it yourself. And so, with my twin brother and I, who's now in Louisville, we started delivering papers in different routes back in fourth grade, which was early to mid 70s. And we were delivering papers all the way until I went to college. And, in Terre Haute with my four brothers, we controlled a lot of the South in Terre Haute, South of Indiana State University, the papers. But I think the things that it taught us was that, you were up every morning, 7 days a week, every day of the year, good or bad weather, raining, snowing, whatever, to deliver those papers. And so our family was used to not going on vacation, because who could take over the nearly 700 papers that my family was throwing about every day.
Wow.
And it taught us a lot about, commitment. I think the hardest thing that we had to overcome, because as we got older and learning and gaining their responsibilities and developing customer relationships, and getting the paper out, by 6 o'clock in the morning, we started to get involved in athletics. And the biggest time crunch on us, and now starting to travel with baseball teams, basketball, track and field, whatever, with my brothers, the hardest thing was going back in the evenings, knocking on the doors, trying to collect. And people not being home.
That was left to you guys to do it, right? There's no this computer billing like they have now.
No. And so when we got into middle school, we approached and it kind of reminds me of an old 50s movie when you got all your stuff together, you drove up to downtown Terre Haute, and they lifted up the sliding door, and you sat there and negotiated with the business agent to what you owed, and you paid him on paper stops and all that. It was interesting how early elementary we learned negotiating skills, for sure. But also when we had talked to the manager when we started doing this, that the time commitment and times have changed, that we had got the Terre Haute Tribune at the time, because the Star and Tribune were two papers, the Tribune in the afternoon, the Star in the morning, and eventually they were all morning papers.
Right.
And kept the name the Terre Haute Tribune Star. And so we put letters together and delivered them with all the papers, saying that if you still wanted to get the paper from us, you had to pay by check. And I don't remember any grumblings at the time by our customers, but everybody did it, because if they didn't pay by mail, we were running out of time, going back to the same house every month 3 or 4 times,
right,
to collect. And I want to guess every morning, at least on my paper out, I probably rode 4 to 5 miles just on my bike. And to even collect now and getting involved in athletics, it worked very well. We were probably one of the first families that started doing that. in the 70s to say that people had to pay us by check and mail, and it made it a lot easier. Then you got into record keeping and all the skills that you had to learn to do that, which now in today's world it's easy with Word and Excel. But those things weren't around in the 70s.
That's amazing. Well, you guys covered it all, and that's kind of the story I think that is fun to tell, and that's the things you learn in that first job. And as you said, you're running this through high school, so you're a young man doing it, not just a kid. I mean, I guess we're all kids in high school too, but from the standpoint of your awareness, that has to be great training for you, no matter what you do. So that's a great. That's one reason why I want to do that story. You were telling me, Don. Tell us about Sundays, because Sunday paper is a different animal. How did you handle that?
Oh yeah, a couple things that come to mind is my grandfather was on my paper route. He was a very well-known businessman in Terre Haute, a guy named Charlie Garvin. And if I would come by the house anything after 5 a.m., he would be on the porch saying, "Well, where the hell you been all day? I've been waiting for you." And he was always like that, always good to give his grandson a hard time, but he was always up waiting on me for the paper before 5 in the morning.
Wow.
That's one thing that I remember about that, but also riding about half mile to 3/4 of a mile away from the house on Sunday mornings was difficult. We'd have to put the inserts in, and then when the Tribune Star merged and went with just one paper, my papers went from 70 to about 140, 150, and I think maybe the high end was 170, which was hard when you're on your bike trying to take all that weight on a Sunday edition. I would load up 4 bags, one on each handlebar and one on the basket, and put a lot of weight and pressure on that just to ride over to the start of my route, which is the start of my old grandfather's gas station. I would hide the Sunday papers behind the store so I wouldn't have to ride all the way back home when I ran out of the first 2 bags of papers on Sundays. And I remember that half mile to 3/4 mile ride with all those papers was rough with all that weight. It was Sundays were always interesting because of the weight of the paper and putting the inserts in and the pressure it put on my bike.
Well, and what a training, because you're being modest, Don, but you are a pretty successful track participant in track meets. That was pretty good training for you, wasn't it? Biking with all that weight and riding 4 or 5 miles a day. That had to be.
Yeah, and reminds me of the story. And I think Steve, we talked about it, but growing up at Terre Haute South and my twin brother and I having a lot of school records at the time in the early 80s, and then being recruited by colleges to go to run for them. I had about 5 or 6 schools, all after me, Division I schools. My brother had one Division I school with a bunch of other D2s, but one of the things that it taught us was even after the paper route, when we're done, going back home and getting the stuff in that 2-mile run to Terre Haute South High School, we did every morning too, and our coaches would just pick up stuff. But one of the things I remember, my senior year, I was I won the state indoor down at Indiana University in Bloomington, and that's when I started to be recruited. But then the outdoor championship, I was seated number 1, and we were running at the IUPOI Track and Field Stadium, which back in the 80s, I believe a couple times they hosted the Olympic trials over in downtown Indianapolis. And growing up not too far from Indianapolis, we always got to run on that track. And in 83, the qualifications were on a Friday, late afternoon, early evening, and we had to run the trials through to be one of the top 8 to make it to the finals. And so they quickly got it down from 24 to 30 guys down to 8. And so having to run the prelims through, the coaches right after there. And I think I had the fastest time going into that too. And the coaches were trying to talk to my mom and dad that, hey, we're going to stay home here in Indianapolis in a hotel. And my mom and dad kind of looked at each other and said, no, Don's got papers to deliver in the morning. And so I'll never forget that.
Papers come first.
And so that next morning, folding all the papers and getting ready to go, because we had to head out to Indianapolis probably by 8 in the morning. I think we probably ran at 11:30. But folding each one of those papers, my picture with my story was on the front page of the Tarter Tribune. The local has a chance to win the state championship. And I, of course, had a very good track career at Eastern Illinois University. But I learned a lot of those things. I look back to that day, my mom and dad putting that down and say, well, no, he's going home. He's got papers to deliver tomorrow.
Wow.
There was a message. So,
yeah, you had it going, man. I'll tell you. Well, that's a great story, Don, and I think obviously it's prepared you for what you're doing now, which is in an executive position at a time of crisis, and with a lot of folks looking for jobs and looking for help, and that's what it's about. So we appreciate that.
Getting through it is important, and we will, because trying to make the right decisions every day forward, because COVID-19 and this coronavirus was not my doing or anybody in the community's doing, but it's up to us to control it from this point forward as best we can at Goodwill and at Goodwill Commons and the Goodwill stores for our staff, but also making the right decisions today forward so that Goodwill Industries of Central Illinois is here and stronger than ever and here 15, 25 years from now. That's how we're making decisions with our board right now.
Well, that's great. Well, we've been talking with Don Johnson, CEO, President of Goodwill Industries here in the Peoria area. And Don, best to you. We'll stay in touch, and hopefully you guys will be able to open up, let's hope in the weeks ahead. We don't know when, but we'll certainly get that out to the public when it happens.
Steve, thank you. Always appreciate you and what you've done for this community, and you work for the paper, and I threw the papers.
Well, we know your attachment to newspapers, Don. That's official, so we appreciate that. Don, thanks again, and we'll see everybody else on Tartar Sauce. Take care, everybody.
Yep. See you, Steve.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.
PeoriaLife.com